Start. So welcome to travel sponsorship, sponsoring BoF, and I can just let Gaudenz do the rest of the introduction.
For the latecomers, it would also for you be nice if you could sit here so we can talk together and not hide behind the others. I was originally the one proposing this BoF, then Tiago, Giacomo, and David joined me. The list is ordered by the alphabetic order of the first names, if you wonder, and we tried to prepare this BoF 2 days ago, I think it was, and we already had a discussion of 2 hours, so that will be a bit constrained. So then we decided, I'm gonna be a bit to manage. David is going to take some notes on Gobi. You can all, if you want, connect to the gobi.debian.org server. There's under BoFs, it has a document travel sponsorship. And I'm going to do a short introduction, but then I think it should be open discussion. We defined some topics we would like to discuss, and yeah. So the goals for this session, we thought that we have to narrow this a bit down because that's a broad topic. Our goals are to have better defined criteria for the next Debconf, so we can try out this process for next Debconf, and possibly better or other or different questions matching these criteria. And the third goal is, it's nice to talk here. We had these talks twice, I think, in the past, and something's changed too also, but the sound is going out. La 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 la. Okay, so at the end of this session, we would also like to form a team that carries on with this. We have some non-goals. This session should not be about the actual money handling, not about what was discussed on the mailing list already. It's not set what was discussed there, but I think that's somewhat a different topic. So we would like to keep this out of this session, and also accommodation and food sponsoring, if possible, should be kept out. So how it works today, for those that don't know or have never been involved with it, it's this year's process. It works similar in previous year, but not exactly the same. The applicants, they have to fill in a form in Penta. They give us their total travel costs. The next question is labeled amount I'm unable to find myself.
Can I talk about that?
Not yet.
The wording, I think, is wrong because
Yeah, that's the wording we have now in Penta. Now it's just about what we have now to see, and there's enough time for discussion afterwards. And there's one free text rational that's labeled, what are you doing for Debian? Why do you request sponsorship? So we have these three things. Then the team rates all the applicants on two dimensions. One is the contributor level. The other is called requested amount for the raters. And it's on a scale from minus, these are two minus that were combined by LaTeX, to plus. So there's a 0 level in the middle, so it's 5 on 5 levels. And we then combine these two ratings into one, and with a weight for the contributor level of 0.6 and for the requested amount ranking of 0.4. Then they were sorted according this score and granted sponsoring, just going down the list until we reach the budget, $80,000 $80,000 of amounts they were unable to found of this question. Yeah. Some statistics, as I said, $80,000 was the budget this year. Last year it was 33,000 euros. We had this year 42 applicants. We don't know for last year, and we granted 18 requests. Of those 18, for one it was too late, so he cancelled. And in 2011, 53 requests were granted. We don't know if there were more applicants than these 53 at all, or if everyone got it. And the team thought that we would have liked to grant 9 additional requests if there would have been more money. And the rest of the applicants were below 0 on our score. So we thought we would not like to grant these requests even if we had more money. What?
This year, you also only granted sponsorship if you could found the full amount, right? There was no partial sponsorship.
Yeah, there was some discussion among the team if we should do partial sponsorship of the requested amount, and the majority of the team decided to not do that, on the basis that if it reads amount I'm unable to found, 80% of it is worthless because then they don't come. Yeah. So the first discussion topic is, and I think that will probably be the one that takes most of the time also, is that what should be the criteria, the basis for granting these travel sponsorship requests? Now we have these 2 dimensions, its need and its contribution level. Yes?
Yeah, I have a question from IRC. Was the money for the one cancellation subsequently allocated to anyone else?
No, it was not, because at some time the whole Debconf team decided to not do this because it's too late.
Yeah, I think the confirmation of sponsorship was sent like 3 weeks before the Debconf. So.
Yeah.
Because money was available too late, Tiago said.
So then, just to give you an overview, what we planned, the next topic would be about the information we then need. What should we ask? A few ideas. Then one about should these requests and what was granted be made public, and how to proceed. Just a short summary of the criteria. I think that there, as I said, there are widely varying opinions, and I think the varying opinions are mostly grouped around this question: should it be, and if yes, how, based on the actual need of the person requesting it or not. It ranges from, if you should only request it if I can't buy food anymore if I don't get it, to if my employer does not pay it, then you should just request it, and if possible also get it, the money. And another question we could ask: do we need agreed upon criteria at all, or there are also opinions that say if the opinion about this are distributed or varying inside the team, then we get in the end somewhat the consensus of whatever criteria might be applied. Yeah.
Maybe just a quick comment.
I will switch
or
to
not.
the Or
Okay.
do you think we should stay on the slide?
No, just a quick comment on that last point, since
Yeah.
it was originally a concern for me too. But then I realized what we had essentially was 8 or 10 independent ratings of each person, and as long as each rater rated all people the same way, then it's in some sense okay.
I have a, I mean, to actually answer the question about should these requests be public, it's generally not considered a good idea to publish, for example, the kind of thing that you would have to put on an application like your income and so forth. And in a lot of cultures, there's stigma associated to needing financial help, and in particular giving detailed information necessary. So at the very least, I don't think that we could sensibly publish the amount of sponsorship that people have received. Maybe it would be worth just identifying who was thought a sufficiently valuable contributor that they received some kind of sponsorship. But the financial end of it is going to be very...
But could we please stay on topic now, and I think we will try to have the other topics later. So.
Okay, sorry.
I wanted to say something about the other topic, about the criteria. I think it will be, I think it's more fair for everybody if there is a clearly defined criteria, because also there is people that feel like maybe I'm cheating the project if I'm asking for a sponsorship. I feel guilty because I don't do anything, I don't do enough, etc. So I think it will be more fair if it's a clearly defined criteria.
Yeah, I kind of agreeing with that. I don't think it's. I agree that we've got people making the judgment, but there is a problem at the moment if people apply unevenly. I mean, myself, I've never applied for Debconf Travel sponsorship because I think there are other people in Debian who need money far more for that. However, if we decide that actually it's fine for everyone to apply, then I don't really fundamentally object. I'll just start applying too. I think it's a bit silly at the moment if some people apply and get it just because they think it's okay to apply, and other people are not applying. I don't think I'm at all unique in that, in not applying at the moment, because we kind of assume it's for people who really need it in a more fundamental way.
Speaking as the guy who's trying to take minutes, I also would like it if we followed the topic. So can we talk about criteria now? Is that your plan, Gaudenz?
Yeah, that's my plan.
Okay.
But I think the last...
Not that,
that was
that's
fine, yeah.
it's an important, these are, everything is important that people
But
brought
I
up.
think one part of talking about criteria is also talking about if we really need criteria, and I think that was your topic.
Okay, sorry.
If I understood it correctly.
Hello. That's more proposal.
Yeah,
talking about
just before we move
just
on from that.
Phil first.
Just before we move on from that and forget about it entirely, where the no criteria thing comes from, it was possibly an idea of mine last year, which is that it's not that you have no criteria, you have a sort of smorgasbord of criteria that you suggest to the team, and they can apply them as they feel fit to produce an ordered list. And that if you then get people rising to the top of those ordered lists, they will get funded for all the reasons that all the people in the team think are important. And I think the problem with having a fixed criteria is that quite often you have people in the team applying criteria they don't really agree with, and then sort of subtly gaming the way they give their points to try and make the criteria they really agree with pop out of the system at the end. And that's much worse.
Yeah, I think we may be mixing up two kind of ideas about criteria here. One is who we think should be applying at all, and who we kind of advertise should be applying, and one is how we actually make the judgment. I'm not, but in my point a moment ago, I wasn't trying to say how we should actually make the judgment in the end precisely, but I think we should, at the absolute minimum, even if we didn't have a formulated metric for comparing people, we should at the minimum have advertise who we are expecting to apply. Are we expecting everyone coming to be to validly apply and get money if we happen to have it lying around, or is this meant to be a bursary scheme for particularly people who particularly need it?
Yeah, I think Christian wanted to say something. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure. I might be off topic because I had hard, I had hard times following both Moray and Phil. So sorry for that. Please slow down when you speak, people. My suggestion, talking about criteria, my first idea was sharing the way we raters actually rated up to now. But I don't know if that's a good idea. That's
now
just
in the
an open
session.
problem.
Yeah, we can do that.
That could be done,
Yeah.
briefly, preferably, but that could give ideas to others. My personal idea is we shouldn't have all the same criteria to kind of balance them together in some way. Should they? It's hard for me to say they should be public or not, because I'm having even hard time sometimes to be sure about my own criteria. Once you have done this, you understand what I'm talking about, I guess. So that was a proposal. I don't know. Maybe it's too long time for this session. I don't know.
Yeah, just.
Yeah. So my own criteria, I was trying to avoid to make a kind of put quotes where needed a preference to always the same people in some way. I witnessed that we tend to do that with travel sponsorship over time. It's like 3 successive Debconf I'm doing that. And I tried to imagine the contribution of people and more have a picture of what they could bring to Debian. So it was kind of the same idea Joey brought last Debconf, I think. For Debian newbies or things like that. And I'm happy that this year I think we have been able to do that in some way, to bring new people in Debian and not sponsor quotes, always the same people, right? I'm sure that those people, some need that, some are very, very valuable contributors. I ended up plus all the time. Those people I know are wide and respected and important or whatever Debian contributors. So these were mostly my criteria, and my criteria for rating travel was more trying to guess the price and whether it's reasonable or not for the person to request of that price. Of course, some were more expensive than others, and try to forget that. It's not really precise, but this is the way I did actually.
Yeah.
I think
I can continue.
No, I was going to.
Oh, you can too.
Hello. Yeah. I think there's more than one criteria. There's more than one group of people who deserve sponsorship. There are different reasons and different level of the amount people cannot pay. So I think this should be taken into consideration. And also what Christian said, this newbie initiative is also a good thing we should keep having. Like we had it last year and the year before and not this year, which I'm very sad about.
Yeah, but there was the idea Christian proposed that those that rated this year should explain a bit how they did it. So just short.
We're drifting away with the topic. I know it's going a bit back in time, but well, Jonathan Wiltshire said that, just joining into this, he would be very unhappy to have specific numbers, specific amounts published. He wouldn't mind Jonathan was sponsored, partially sponsored, but not the specific numbers. He says, I suspect the number of applications would drop too, and therefore valuable contributors might not get a chance to be there. I mean, we went already over it, but...
To that topic, I think it's completely clear that the granted sponsorship should be public. We as Debian need to document how we spend our money, so we cannot say, oh yeah, we hid it there under the carpet.
There is transparency, but even transparency has...
I will try to ensure that we have time for this topic, but I would really like to keep it on topic now.
Thanks.
So probably just one other opinion about how you did the rating. I don't know if Bremner or... Yeah, I think for contribution level, I just did a quick Google or Debian.org search, and for the requested amount, it was a bit fuzzy. I don't know if I consistently myself applied the same criteria, because I was constantly asking myself, oh, I didn't know really how to weight this. But you definitely got a higher ranking by me if you paid a substantial amount yourself. And if I thought that the price or your travel costs seemed unreasonable, I did a quick search on flight search engines to verify if it's somewhat reasonable.
Okay, have we had everybody who did it this year now?
So I guess I was biased towards people doing sort of core infrastructure stuff in addition to packaging. Or so I mean, I do packaging, but I wouldn't have ranked myself that highly for travel sponsorship. I was biased toward people who were really sort of doing extra stuff and above and beyond, whether that's reasonable or not. That's what I did. And for travel, I found the two. I was equally confused as Gaudenz, but I really just looked at the requested amount compared to the geographic location. So I didn't penalize people for being from far away, but again, I had some similar idea about, I guess there was an underlying thought that, well, if we can pay for 5 people, all else being equal, if we can pay for 5 people rather than 1, we should probably pay for 5.
At the risk of, I think it's within the agenda point, so don't beat me up if it's not. We're talking here about criteria for comparing individuals, which is obviously what you need to think about in the first instance. But the point that's being raised here is also valid of how, if you've got this comparison, imagine you assign some perfectly accurate score to each individual. There is still a question about how you actually decide who to give the money to in the end. I think every year, all that's happened recently has been people counted down from the highest ranking person to the lowest ranking, which obviously avoids having to think about something more complicated, but it's not necessarily the best way to spend Debian's money to do that. If you imagine, I mean, you can easily imagine things like person 1 costs the same as person 2 to 11 together, or as in the next person in the list, person n costs the same as the next 10 would be, and maybe it would be more useful to Debian overall to bring those 10 people instead of 1 person from very far away. Obviously that gets into, there's a lot of different issues you then need to start thinking about of fairness over years and so on. But I do think it's wrong just to say, well, let's just carry on blindly and only count down the list and ignore this issue.
And there's also the bias that we enforce over the years is that if we rank by contributor level, then we risk that we only reduce the set over time. And one good advantage of Debconf was the newbies found last year, for example, is just bring new people to the thing, but get benefit from Debconf just because you are not yet a core member. And I mean, on one hand, it's good to have core members here because it's also good work done, etc. But we have also to put some ways into having new contributors in, I think.
Right, so if I can sort of propose a slightly more formal way of looking at this, it seems that we have essentially kind of roughly 3 criteria for granting sponsorship. The first is that the person is a worthwhile person to have at Debconf for some reason or other, and that's a thing that a lot of people have been talking about, for example, with newbies or core people or whatever, and that's a thing that we need to talk about in more detail. The second criterion is really, nobody seems to be saying that everybody should be applying for sponsorship. There's obviously some criterion of financial need.
That's totally obvious. That's one thing I'd like to talk about.
Yeah.
Right. I would like to propose that the criterion should be that essentially the person would not be able to attend Debconf otherwise. because the point of the exercise is to enable people to come to Debconf, not to subsidize people in general. And the third criterion is something a bit more woolly, but it's that the travel cost, the actual claim is reasonable, that the travel costs they're claiming are roughly sensible and they're kind of fairly straightforward criteria.
I would like just to comment on one of your points. I would not agree so much on this, that people that can come otherwise should not apply. I mean, some people are able to get lend money and get and make a commitment to get money they don't have access to, which can be hard for people to do who would come. But part of the sponsorship is making life less miserable for them. So yeah, I mean, I think I was just adding to the Gobi document that we should add a quantitative field asking what would be your action if it was denied to you. So I would go anyway. Two, I would definitely no go. Don't go.
Yeah.
Yeah, so just to let you understand what can happen, I will talk about my specific case. So I asked for travel sponsorship. I've been denied, and as you can see, I'm still here. What happened is that I asked my mother, okay, and it's going to affect me for the rest of the year. It's not because I'm here, then you should have, it was the right thing not to sponsor me, I believe. Because like, I care about Debian, and it affects my life, but I still want to come. I don't know if I made it clear.
I think you and Gunnar are still not disagreeing with the idea that there should be some kind of need criterion, though.
Indeed.
Okay,
Indeed. I didn't want to suggest that there should be a particular specific criteria.
Yeah.
The question is
as a kind
roughly.
What? Sorry? What? Tiago,
I'm just pointing a discussion that we had past Debconf about this, the needs, and the Dart wrote this topics to please.
What? These are the same phrases. Was some proposal how to
and just
assess
I agree
need.
with this approach.
Sure, but I guess I suppose can we ask, is there anyone here who really thinks we should ignore need? And it should, for example, I mean, to have a hypothetical example, should we be expecting that next time Mark Shuttleworth comes to Debconf, he would be perfectly validly applying for travel sponsorship if he's doing something in Debian at the time?
It's a big if.
No, yeah.
So I think the only reason I would propose and have occasionally in private discussions propose not having a need criteria is that it seems very difficult to have a need criteria that we agree on and to have one which is applied consistently. And I think that a need criteria that is kind of fuzzy and badly applied is maybe worse than not having one.
Yeah, I agree that the situation as it is now, in my opinion, is worse than just saying everyone that has to pay it out of their own pocket should apply.
Just wanted
because I think that was also your introduction that you said today. Some apply and some don't, and I think that's not a fair situation.
So as I said before, and we agreed on the same thing, it's quite important to have this criteria for the people to decide if they should apply or not, to make more fair the whole process. And the other thing I was going to propose, since there seems to be this recurring theme of people who are really big contributors and really well-known people, and there's these people who are newbies, maybe a good way to solve this is to have two separate budgets. So we have this money for newbies, and we apply with a different criteria that for the people who are big contributors.
I think we all agree on that.
I'm not so sure if I can have an opposite. I'm not so sure because it's quite easy to get involved into Debian without being present. So it could also be an option to say people should be involved first because it's possible to do that without coming to any conference, and if they show some interest, then they basically are getting sponsoring.
Something about criteria, that it's a typical problem in movie rating and that kind of things. So we just need a lot of people ranking, and the criteria then becomes unnecessary. I mean, if we are all of the Debconf attendants just ranking 3 or 4 people, the criteria becomes fair by the
well, I think everyone should rate all the people to have consistent ranking.
But there are privacy issue, so we don't want.
You ask for sponsors, so you should be able to.
Well, there are 2 things about that. First, movies you rank about some criteria still. I mean, is the actress beautiful or some blah blah blah, and it's criteria that we know in advance. The other thing I just wanted to just throw into the discussion, I'm not yet convinced myself that it's a good idea, but one obvious or objective measure that we could ask is, what is your annual income and what is the part you're asking? I mean, that might be considered, it's just a measure that is somehow consistent across the countries of the effort. I mean, is it a month's worth of your income? Is it half a month? Is it a day? Or is it 3 months? And I mean, that's a measure of the effort you have to make to come. And I don't know. I'm not sure it's yet a good idea, but I'm just throwing it to the discussion.
I think a bit to what Luciano said. I think this would not. We cannot give everybody ranking rights, but having a big enough committee, as we have had, ensures that the criteria is at least more distributed. So I think having 10 people rank should be enough, in my opinion, even if they have some diversity, some divergence in their opinions. And well, I don't think that the DDR is so crazy. I think that should come into account, and not only for travel sponsorship, but also for lodging and food. I think it does make a difference, and even more when we are tight on money, as we were this year. I think it's a fair thing to ask.
Right. So I'm very strongly opposed to this notion that that we'll just have 10 people and they'll each bring their own ideas to the table and somehow the result will be fair. That is not a way to get fair outcomes. If you let people make decisions in an unstructured way and you don't give them formal guidance, what you get is people's unexamined prejudices. And even when you've got good people who are trying their best, those kind of prejudices, the structure doesn't provide you with the assistance to overcome your prejudices. And this is why we should have a system that requires the people making the decision to go through a set of criteria and think about them and make a decision in a structured way. That's not to say that everybody has to agree. It means that everybody has to think about the same questions and think about things in the same way.
Okay, sorry, I think we're running out of time for this topic. If we want to discuss others, I think we can continue this in the BoF room or wherever if there's interest. Just to finish this, I would like you to ask a few questions. Raise your hand, those that think we should, or only minimal criteria should be need and just everyone should be able to apply. Sorry, what? Just on this need thing, who thinks that mostly everyone should apply, and it should not be based on needs that much? So, no. Yes. Yeah. Right. We want to count, and again.
It just made me think. The thing is that if we have everyone apply, then we have a larger set. So it makes it harder for the rating team, but it also makes it evenly distributed across the people that will come in the end.
Okay.
But in that case, we need more criteria.
Wait.
That's the wrong question.
Wait.
Who should be granted? based on need is the question. Sure.
Yeah, we
Would
can
you
also
like
do
a
it that way.
microphone?
I think if people apply, there should be some expecting that they at least could be granted if there's money.
So put up your hand if you think that travel sponsorship should be granted regardless of financial need. Right?
I don't think.
Put up your
my
hand if
question
you
was
think
not
travel
really
sponsorship should be granted only to those with a financial need.
Ian, you have very valid points, but you're also talking over the BoF moderator, which I find personally distressing.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, but can you raise your hand again so David can count? So it's actually. Okay, it was a bad idea, I think. I think my idea was that this BoF should not be only about those talking a lot, but also to gather a bit more quantitative opinions, how people actually think. But, yeah.
I think there's more than one kind of need. So the question.
It's
the question.
Okay.
I would like to.
My idea was to just have. Are you more leaning towards we should just grant those that actually very much need it and couldn't come otherwise, or should we grant also those that have to pay it out of their own pocket? It probably affects them somehow, but they would come otherwise too.
I think.
So.
And it's
that's your opinion. Others might have other opinions. So that's what I want to find out.
I think might be tricky to phrase this into a yes/no question like just now, because it seems that there is many shades in this. There's many vectors to consider. So probably this kind of voting is a bit diverting from the real goal of trying to find something that's better.
The idea of the vote is not that if one person more leans on the one side, we just do it that way. It's just to gather some view of the general what people think.
Are you going to ask about these 4 criteria there now, or just about the 2 questions?
I was thinking just about the 2, but
because I think these 2 questions are.
Yeah. Okay, we can also say
completely not enough,
please,
because there's way then more.
Okay.
There's not only give it to all or only give it to those in need, because there's different needs.
Okay, I have another idea. It was just a spontaneous idea. Of these 4 levels of need, where do you think we should draw the line? What? Hey.
I personally think it would make maybe sense to have different budgets. To have one budget for newbies, one budget for this criteria need, and that for that criteria need. That would split the money further, but I think
I don't know.
Could be worth trying.
Martin.
I'm not involved in travel sponsorship in any way, but just something I was thinking about while I'm listening to what you're saying is, at the university they have scholarships, and there are 2 types of scholarships. One of them is a merit-based scholarship where it doesn't matter, if you're poor or not. It's just based on what you've done. So in terms of Debian, it would be your contribution. And the other one would be a needs-based. So if you're poor, then you're more likely to get it. So and the third thing I heard here is about the newbies. So what I'm thinking is maybe there should be different slots. So we have so much money, we can sponsor X people, and then out of those X people, 2 of them are going to be newbies, 3 of them are going to be needs-based, and 3 of them are going to be contribution-based. That might be another idea.
I in general agree with this, but one inconvenience we would have is that, we're heading towards a system where the number of queues approaches the number of applicants, and then people would, let's say the fight or the discussion would be to which queue are you to be assigned. So yeah, there are some criteria like newbies that's clearly easy to get. But say, if I want to get sponsorship, should I wait in the line for the disadvantaged countries or for the people contributing to Debian? Or to both, or to what?
Yeah. I would like to go to the public or not public topic, because we just have 5 minutes left to...
On that, I'd just say I think, although I realize there are some privacy concerns about exactly what you make public, I think it is a fair thing that if you are applying for money from Debian, you should have to accept as part of that at the very least your name is going to be made public, because that also just it takes away one level of problem by meaning that whatever stupid criteria we end up coming up with, even if they're really bad, at least then other people in the project can look at it and just make some opinion about whether they want to interfere or not. If it's just a black box and they have no idea, it's not really a good way to spend Debian money, in my view.
I think also it's very important that it's clear to everyone if they apply what's going to be public.
Right.
So I think we can't do it for this year's. But
what I would like to suggest is that the application the parts of the application which relate to why should I be sponsored, in terms of what am I going to do for Debian, what is my justification for having Debian's money, that part that's not the financial side should be made public, and I think it would be fine to ask people for their income, but that should be kept private, and the result should be, these are the applications that we accepted, and you just get told this person was sponsored or not.
In the other way around, could be useful for the applicant if the people says the output, public the output of the comments, the comment box. I sent an email like 2 weeks ago asking for those boxes. I mean, just anonymous ways to know what. Sorry?
Yeah, I think it's, on one hand, it's probably tricky to completely anonymize this, and it's also, at least with the current system, quite some work if you want to do this for everyone.
I think opening I mean, yes, there should be something said back to the person as to why they were accepted or rejected. But I think it would open to lots of disagreements. If in your comments somebody said something you don't 100% agree on, then there will be flames. So that can be problematic.
Probably a good idea is that the team as a whole makes some statement for each person instead of trying to anonymize votes or something.
So are you
if you're able to find the volunteers
I'm not saying,
that do that,
I'm not saying getting a consensus like, yeah, I do these 5 people, and I more or less summarize what people said.
Actually, there's not much to summarize, at least currently, because it's mostly a rating on this scale and very few comments.
Yeah, well, James says on IRC that publishing names only, he says, is fair enough. Publishing Debian sponsored this amount to those attendees, X amount to Y attendees, numeric is fine, because Debian needs to be transparent. My name asked for this amount isn't. Other combinations become a gray area. So yeah, I mean, finding which combination to publish is...
I somewhat disagree. I think it would be fine to say this person requested that amount. Why not?
I think it's the source of flames also, because then people have access to the result without having access to the discussion. And I mean, we have a discussion in smoky rooms for a reason, because it involves a lot amount of private things, and the result is also still be made from the private discussions we had. So
it's actually quite typical that the results are known, but the discussion is not, in many other contexts that I participate in. So in scholarship deliberations and in research grant deliberations, the results are almost always public. So I, of course, can respect whatever consensus people within Debian want, but personally, I agree with Gaudenz that I would also be willing to have the amount of sponsorship published if it was me. And I think that information of amount, although I agree it can be problematic, I think it is somehow an important aspect of transparency too. So maybe the privacy concerns are too much and we can't do it, but I think it would be a good thing if we could.
Yeah, I'm not... Oh. I wouldn't fight strongly on this point, but I personally I do agree, and I think if people the main people wouldn't in my personal view, the major reason people wouldn't want it published is just they kind of feel embarrassed about having had this money. But if that's the case, then I don't think they should be applying in the first instance.
So okay, time's out. Sorry. I propose the following. I would like to form a team of people who are willing to define the process for next year and also execute it.
I like very much this executing idea.
I also like Phil's idea that it's not just the same people who make the decisions, though.
What?
We're meant to finish, aren't we? But yeah. I like Phil Hans's idea that it's not just the same core of people who actually do the voting. So when you say do the execution,
I don't necessarily think that has to be the team that does the voting, but I think they have also to follow up to actually implement the process they invented, so that we don't just end up with a proposed process and then in next April something completely else is going to implement it. Yeah. And if you're interested, we could, after the discussion, meet in front and decide if we want another meeting to have at Debconf or via IRC or whatever, how to proceed. So, but I thank you for the discussion.
Can I finish on the very nice words? I'd like to say that it would be really great if next year we had money for everyone. That's it.
I don't agree.
Thank you.